when Derek Moore, a 25-year-old garbage collector, lifted the lid of the bin outside Mr. Henderson's house. He thought it would be another routine day on his familiar route. But what he found inside made his heart skip a beat. Just then, the front door creaked open, and Derek came face to face with Mr. Henderson, the once proud elderly man of the neighborhood. He stood there, frail and unkempt, his eyes filled with a haunting sadness that told a story of suffering. In that chilling moment, Derek knew he had to act fast. Before we dive in, let us know in the comments where you're watching from today, and if you find yourself gripped by this emotional journey, don't forget to subscribe. The early morning sun cast a golden glow over Maple Street as Derek Jones stepped out of his small apartment. At 25, he was eager to start his new job as a garbage collector in this quiet suburban neighborhood. Derek adjusted his cap, his dark skin glistening with a thin sheen of sweat in the warm air. He took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of freshly cut grass and blooming flowers. First day on the job, he muttered to himself, a mix of excitement and nervousness in his voice. Let's make it count. As Derek walked towards the waiting garbage truck, he couldn't help but notice the pristine lawns and well-maintained houses lining the street. It was a far cry from the bustling city where he grew up, but he was determined to make this new chapter of his life work. His co-worker, Mike, a middle-aged man with graying hair, greeted him with a nod. "Ready for your first day, kid?" Derek grinned, revealing a set of perfect white teeth. "You bet. I'm excited to meet the neighbors and do a good job." Mike chuckled, shaking his head. "Don't get your hopes up. Folks around here tend to keep to themselves." As they started their route, Derek waved and smiled at every person he saw. Most of them quickly averted their gaze or hurried inside their homes. A few nodded curtly, but none returned his friendly greeting. "Good morning," Derek called out to an elderly woman watering her roses. She glanced at him, then promptly turned her back. Undeterred, Derek continued his work, efficiently collecting trash bins and returning them to their spots. He took pride in his job, making sure not to leave any litter behind. As the morning wore on, Derek began to notice a pattern. The residents of Maple Street seemed to view him with a mix of suspicion and disinterest. He overheard whispers as he passed by a group of women chatting on a porch. "Who's the new guy?" one of them asked in a hushed tone. "I don't know, but he doesn't look like he's from around here," another replied, eyeing Derek warily. Derek pretended not to hear, focusing instead on his work. He reminded himself that change takes time, and he was determined to win over the neighborhood with his positive attitude and hard work. As they turned onto Oak Avenue, Derek's eyes were drawn to a house that stood out from the rest. Unlike the other well-maintained properties, this one looked neglected. The paint was peeling, the lawn overgrown, and the curtains were always drawn. "Hey, Mike," Derek called out, pointing to the rundown house. "What's the story with that place?" Mike glanced over and sighed. "That's old Mr. Henderson's house. Poor guy's been a recluse ever since his wife passed away last year. Hardly ever see him anymore." Derek felt a pang of sympathy. As they approached the house to collect the trash, he noticed movement behind one of the curtains. A pair of tired, wary eyes peered out at him before quickly disappearing. "Mr. Henderson?" Derek called out softly. "Good morning, sir. I'm Derek, the new garbage collector. Just wanted to say hello." There was no response, but Derek could sense someone watching him from behind the curtain. He smiled warmly in that direction before continuing with his work. As the days passed, Derek settled into his new routine. He continued to greet everyone he saw, determined to break through the invisible barrier that seemed to separate him from the residents of Maple Street. One morning, as Derek was collecting trash from Mrs. Thompson's house, he noticed her struggling with a heavy box of old magazines. "Let me help you with that, ma'am," Derek offered, quickly moving to assist her. Mrs. Thompson hesitated for a moment, eyeing Derek suspiciously. But as he gently took the box from her arms, her expression softened slightly. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Derek beamed. "It's my pleasure, Mrs. Thompson. Have a wonderful day." As he walked away, he could hear Mrs. Thompson murmuring to her neighbor, "He seems like a nice young man, doesn't he?" It was a small victory, but Derek felt a surge of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he was starting to make a difference. Throughout the week, Derek continued to observe Mr. Henderson's house. Every day, he would see the curtain twitch slightly as he approached, but the old man never showed himself. "Hey, Mike," Derek said as he climbed back into the truck. "I'm worried about Mr. Henderson. Have you ever spoken to him?" Mike shook his head. "Not in years. He used to be a friendly guy, always chatting with the neighbors. But after his wife died, it's like he just gave up on life." Derek frowned, his mind racing with concern for the old man. "Isn't there someone who checks on him? Family or friends?" "Not that I know of," Mike replied. "Folks around here, they like to mind their own business, you know?" As they continued their route, Derek couldn't stop thinking about Mr. Henderson. He made a silent promise to himself to keep a closer eye on the old man's house. The next day, Derek arrived at work early. He had brought a small potted plant, a cheerful marigold he had grown on his apartment windowsill. Before starting his route, he walked over to Mr. Henderson's house and gently placed the plant on the front porch. "Good morning, Mr. Henderson," Derek called out softly. "I brought you a little something to brighten up your day. I hope you like flowers." There was no response, but Derek thought he saw the curtain move slightly. He smiled and waved before heading back to the truck. As the weeks passed, Derek continued his efforts to connect with the residents of Maple Street. Slowly but surely, he began to see small changes. Mrs. Thompson now greeted him with a smile when he collected her trash. Mr. Johnson, a gruff retired police officer, had started to nod at Derek as he passed by. But Mr. Henderson remained a mystery. The potted plant had disappeared from the porch, but Derek couldn't tell if it had been taken inside or thrown away. He continued to greet the old man every morning, even though he never received a response. One particularly hot afternoon, Derek was struggling with a heavy trash bin when he felt a tap on his shoulder. He turned to find a young girl, about 10 years old, holding out a glass of lemonade. "My mom said you might be thirsty," she said shyly. Derek's face lit up with a grateful smile. "That's so kind of you. Thank you very much. What's your name?" "I'm Lily," the girl replied, her initial shyness fading. "You're always so nice to everyone, even when they're not nice back." Derek chuckled, touched by the girl's observation. "Well, Lily, I believe that kindness is always the right choice, even when it's hard." As Lily skipped away, Derek noticed Mr. Henderson watching from his window. For a brief moment, their eyes met, and Derek thought he saw a flicker of something. Longing? Regret? In the old man's gaze before the curtain fell back into place. As the weeks rolled by, Derek settled into his routine on Maple Street. The crisp autumn air carried the scent of fallen leaves, and the neighborhood buzzed with the usual morning activities. However, Derek couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about Mr. Henderson's house. One brisk Tuesday morning, Derek approached the old man's residence, ready to collect the trash as usual. But as he neared the bin, he noticed it was overflowing, a stark contrast to its typically meager contents. "What in the world?" Derek muttered, furrowing his brow. He peered into the bin, his curiosity piqued. Among the usual household waste, he spotted several discarded items that seemed out of place. Old, leather-bound books with cracked spines lay haphazardly atop a pile of crumpled papers. Empty pill bottles rattled as he moved the bin, their labels torn off as if someone had tried to hide their contents. What caught Derek's eye most was a collection of broken household items, a shattered picture frame, fragments of a ceramic vase, and pieces of what looked like an antique clock. It was as if Mr. Henderson had gone on a sudden cleaning spree, purging his house of memories and possessions. Derek glanced up at the house, wondering what could have prompted such a drastic clear-out. The curtains remained drawn, but he could have sworn he saw a flicker of movement behind them. "Mr. Henderson?" he called out softly. "Is everything all right?" No response came, but the silence felt heavier than usual. As Derek emptied the bin into the truck, he couldn't help but wonder about the story behind each discarded item. Why would someone throw away so many books? And those pill bottles? Was Mr. Henderson sick? The questions nagged at him as he continued his route, his mind continuously drifting back to the old man's house. Over the next few days, Derek kept a closer eye on Mr. Henderson's property. His vigilance was rewarded, or perhaps unsettled, by a series of odd encounters that left him increasingly concerned. On Thursday morning, as Derek was collecting trash from the house next door, he heard a voice coming from Mr. Henderson's porch. Curious, he glanced over, expecting to see the old man talking to a visitor or perhaps on the phone. To his surprise, Mr. Henderson was alone, pacing back and forth on his porch, engaged in what seemed to be an animated conversation with thin air. No, that's not right, Mr. Henderson muttered, his voice carrying on the quiet morning air. We can't do that. It's not safe. They'll find out. Derek froze, unsure of what to do. Should he intervene? Call someone? As he debated his next move, Mr. Henderson suddenly stopped, his head snapping up as if he'd just noticed Derek's presence. Their eyes met for a brief moment. Mr. Henderson's were wide with what looked like a mix of fear and confusion. Before Derek could say anything, the old man hurried inside, slamming the door behind him. The incident left Derek shaken. He'd known Mr. Henderson was reclusive, but this was different. There was something in the old man's eyes that spoke of a deeper trouble, a distress that went beyond mere loneliness. As the week progressed, Derek witnessed more unsettling behavior. On Friday afternoon, he saw Mr. Henderson in his overgrown backyard, muttering to himself as he dug small holes with a rusty trowel. Got to hide it, the old man whispered urgently, seemingly unaware of Derek's presence. Can't let them find it. No, not safe. Derek watched, his concern growing, as Mr. Henderson placed something small in each hole before covering it up. From his vantage point, Derek couldn't make out what the objects were, but the secretive nature of the act sent a chill down his spine. On Saturday morning, Derek arrived earlier than usual, hoping to catch a glimpse of Mr. Henderson and perhaps find an opportunity to talk to him. As he turned onto Maple Street, he saw the old man standing at his mailbox, still in his bathrobe despite the chilly air. Mr. Henderson was rifling through his mail, muttering under his breath. As Derek approached, he could hear snippets of the one-sided conversation. Bills, always bills, Mr. Henderson grumbled. How am I supposed to pay? They don't understand. No, they can't know. Have to keep it hidden? Just as Derek was about to call out a greeting, Mr. Henderson looked up. For a split second, their eyes met, and Derek saw a flash of recognition in the old man's gaze. But it quickly faded, replaced by a look of confusion and then fear. Before Derek could say a word, Mr. Henderson clutched his mail to his chest and hurried back inside, his movements jerky and panicked. These odd encounters left Derek increasingly worried. He couldn't shake the feeling that Mr. Henderson was struggling with something serious, something that went beyond the normal challenges of aging and loneliness. As Derek went about his work, he began to notice whispered conversations among the neighbors. At first, he tried not to eavesdrop, but his concern for Mr. Henderson made him prick up his ears whenever he heard the old man's name mentioned. One morning, as he was collecting trash from Mrs. Thompson's house, he overheard her talking to her next-door neighbor, Mrs. Davis, over the fence. Have you seen old Mr. Henderson lately? Mrs. Thompson asked, her voice hushed but carrying in the quiet morning air. Mrs. Davis shook her head. Not for weeks. But I heard some strange noises coming from his house last night. Sounded like he was arguing with someone. Arguing? Mrs. Thompson's eyebrows shot up. But he lives alone, doesn't he? Ever since his wife passed away last year, yes, Mrs. Davis finished. Poor man hasn't been the same since. I'm worried he might be losing his mind, talking to ghosts or something. Derek pretended to be focused on his work, but his ears were burning as he listened to the women's conversation. You don't think? Mrs. Thompson lowered her voice even further, forcing Derek to strain to hear. You don't think there might be something darker going on, do you? I mean, all those strange noises, the way he's been acting. Mrs. Davis clicked her tongue. I don't like to spread rumors, but I have wondered. That house holds secrets, mark my words. The women's conversation shifted to other topics, but Derek's mind was reeling. He'd known Mr. Henderson's wife had passed away, but he hadn't realized it was so recent. Could grief be the explanation for the old man's strange behavior? But then he remembered the odd items in the trash, the secretive digging in the backyard, the muttered conversations with unseen listeners. A cold feeling settled in the pit of his stomach. What if there was something more sinister at play? As the days went by, Derek found himself paying even closer attention to the neighborhood gossip. It seemed everyone had a theory about Mr. Henderson, each one more outlandish than the last. At the local coffee shop where Derek stopped for his morning brew, he overheard two middle-aged men discussing the old man over their lattes. "I'm telling you, Joe, something's not right in that house," one man said, leaning in conspiratorially. "My wife swears she saw lights flickering in the windows at 3 a.m. last week. And not normal lights. She said they were blue, almost electric." Joe shook his head skeptically. "Come on, Tom. Blue lights? Sounds like your wife's been watching too many sci-fi movies." "Laugh all you want," Tom retorted. "But how do you explain the noises? Half the streets complained about strange sounds coming from that place at all hours. Banging, scraping. Some even say they've heard screams." Derek's hand froze halfway to his mouth, his coffee momentarily forgotten. Screams? Surely that was an exaggeration. He'd heard some odd noises from Mr. Henderson's house, sure, but nothing that could be described as screaming. Joe seemed to share Derek's skepticism. "Now you're just spinning tales, Tom. Next, you'll be telling me old Henderson's got a dungeon in his basement." Tom's eyes widened. "Funny you should mention that. You know, I've always wondered about that cellar of his. No one's been down there in years, not since his wife was alive. Who knows what he might be hiding?" Derek had heard enough. He grabbed his coffee and hurried out of the shop, his mind whirling with the implications of what he'd overheard. As he drove to work, he couldn't help but mull over all the rumors and whispers he'd heard over the past few days. It seemed everyone in the neighborhood had a theory about Mr. Henderson, each one more outlandish than the last. Derek tried to sort through the information objectively. He knew firsthand that Mr. Henderson had been acting strangely. The overstuffed trash bins, the muttered conversations with himself, the secretive behavior. But was it a sign of something sinister, or just an old man struggling with loneliness and possibly mental health issues? As he turned onto Maple Street, Derek's eyes were drawn, as always, to Mr. Henderson's house. Just as he was about to look away, Derek saw a flicker of movement behind one of the upstairs windows. For a brief moment, he caught a glimpse of Mr. Henderson's face, pale and drawn, staring out at the street with an expression of, what? Fear? Desperation? Before Derek could be sure, the old man disappeared from view, the curtain falling back into place. That fleeting image stayed with Derek throughout his shift. There had been something in Mr. Henderson's eyes, a silent plea that nagged at Derek's conscience. Despite all the wild rumors and speculation, one thing was clear. Mr. Henderson was a man in trouble, whether from external threats or his own inner demons. As Derek finished his route and headed home that evening, he made a decision. He couldn't just stand by and watch anymore. Whatever was going on with Mr. Henderson, Derek was determined to get to the bottom of it. The old man needed help, and if no one else was willing to step up, then Derek would have to be the one to do it. The next morning dawned crisp and clear, a perfect autumn day on Maple Street. Derek arrived at work earlier than usual, his mind set on his self-appointed mission. As he drove down the familiar street, his eyes were drawn, as always, to Mr. Henderson's house. In the pale morning light, the old house looked even more forlorn than usual. The overgrown lawn was dusted with frost, and the peeling paint seemed to glow an eerie white in the early sun. Derek felt a pang of sympathy for the old man living alone in such a neglected home. As he parked his truck, Derek reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He'd spent the previous evening carefully composing a note to Mr. Henderson, offering his help and support. Now, as he approached the old man's mailbox, he felt a mix of nervousness and determination. Derek glanced around, making sure none of the neighbors were watching, then quickly slipped the note into the mailbox. He didn't want to risk knocking on the door and potentially scaring Mr. Henderson. This way, the old man could read the note in private. "I hope this works," Derek muttered to himself as he walked back to his truck. The note was simple but heartfelt. "Dear Mr. Henderson, I'm Derek, your garbage collector. I've noticed you might be going through a tough time, and I wanted to let you know that I'm here if you need any help. Whether it's carrying groceries, fixing something around the house, or just having someone to talk to, please don't hesitate to ask. You can leave a note in your mailbox, or just wave me down when you see me. You're not alone. Sincerely, Derek." As he went about his route, Derek found himself constantly glancing back at Mr. Henderson's house, half expecting to see the old man emerge with the note in hand. But the house remained silent and still, its curtains drawn tight against the world. The next day, Derek approached Mr. Henderson's house with a mixture of hope and apprehension. Had the old man read his note? Would there be a response waiting in the mailbox? As he neared the trash bin, Derek's heart sank. There, among the usual garbage, was a crumpled piece of paper that looked suspiciously familiar. With a sinking feeling, he fished it out and unfolded it. Sure enough, it was his note, crushed and discarded without a response. For a moment, Derek felt a wave of disappointment wash over him. Had he overstepped? Made Mr. Henderson uncomfortable? He was about to toss the note back into the bin when something caught his eye. In the corner of the paper, barely visible, was a smudge that looked like a teardrop. Derek stared at the smudge, his mind racing. Maybe his gesture hadn't been entirely unwelcome after all. Maybe Mr. Henderson was just too proud or too scared to accept help openly. Instead of feeling discouraged, Derek felt his resolve strengthen. He carefully folded the note and put it in his pocket. This wasn't a rejection, he decided. It was a challenge. Over the next few days, Derek kept a close eye on Mr. Henderson's house, looking for any opportunity to make contact. But the old man remained elusive, never emerging when Derek was around. Then one chilly morning about a week after leaving the note, Derek turned on a Maple Street and saw something that made him slam on the brakes. There, sitting on the front steps of his house, was Mr. Henderson. The old man looked small and frail in the morning light, hunched over with his arms wrapped around himself as if for warmth. Even from a distance, Derek could see the lost, broken expression on his face. Derek's heart raced. This was his chance. He parked the truck and slowly approached, not wanting to startle Mr. Henderson. "Good morning, Mr. Henderson," Derek called out softly when he was a few yards away. The old man's head snapped up, his rheumy eyes focusing on Derek with a mix of confusion and wariness. For a moment, Derek thought he might bolt back into the house. But then, to his surprise, Mr. Henderson gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Encouraged, Derek took a few steps closer, keeping his movements slow and non-threatening. "It's a beautiful morning, isn't it?" he said, gesturing at the clear sky. Mr. Henderson didn't respond verbally, but his eyes remained fixed on Derek. There was something in that gaze, a flicker of something beyond the usual fear and suspicion. Was it recognition? A silent cry for help? Derek was about to say more when Mr. Henderson suddenly stood up, his movements stiff and pained. Without a word, he turned and shuffled back into his house, closing the door firmly behind him. Derek stood there for a moment, processing what had just happened. It wasn't much, just a nod and a look, but it felt like a breakthrough. For the first time, Mr. Henderson had acknowledged his presence without immediately retreating. As Derek went about his route that day, he couldn't stop thinking about the encounter. The image of Mr. Henderson sitting alone on those steps, looking so lost and broken, haunted him. He knew he had to do more. Over the next few days, Derek made a point of trying to engage Mr. Henderson whenever he saw him. It wasn't easy. The old man seemed to have a sixth sense for when Derek was around and usually managed to disappear inside before Derek could approach. But Derek was persistent. He'd wave and call out a greeting whenever he caught a glimpse of Mr. Henderson. Sometimes, he'd even try to strike up a conversation, talking about the weather or commenting on the beautiful maple trees that gave the street its name. Most of the time, Mr. Henderson would respond with nothing more than a curt nod or a mumbled word before retreating. But Derek noticed that the old man was taking a little longer each time before disappearing back into his house. One particularly cold morning, Derek arrived on Maple Street to find Mr. Henderson struggling with a large bag of leaves. The old man was trying to drag it to the curb, his thin arms straining with the effort. Without hesitation, Derek parked his truck and jogged over. "Let me help you with that, Mr. Henderson," he called out. Mr. Henderson looked up, startled. For a moment, he seemed about to refuse, his body tensing as if to pull away. But then he looked at the heavy bag, then back at Derek, and gave a small, resigned nod. Derek quickly took hold of the bag, easily lifting it. "Where would you like this, sir?" he asked. Mr. Henderson pointed to the curb, his voice barely above a whisper as he said, "There is fine." As Derek moved the bag, He noticed Mr. Henderson watching him intently. There was still wariness in the old man's eyes, but also something else, a flicker of curiosity, perhaps even a hint of gratitude. Emboldened, Derek decided to press his luck. You know, Mr. Henderson, I'd be happy to help you with yard work anytime, or any other chores you might need a hand with. It's no trouble at all. Mr. Henderson's response was immediate and cold. I don't need help, he snapped, his voice stronger than Derek had ever heard it. I can manage on my own. But even as he spoke, Derek saw a flash of something in the old man's eyes, a mix of sadness and fear that belied his harsh words. It was as if Mr. Henderson was struggling with something he couldn't or wouldn't put into words. Of course, sir, Derek said gently, taking a step back to give Mr. Henderson some space. I just wanted you to know the offer's there if you ever change your mind. Mr. Henderson didn't respond. He just turned and shuffled back towards his house. But just before he reached the door, he paused and looked back at Derek. For a brief moment, their eyes met, and Derek saw a world of unspoken emotion in that gaze, loneliness, fear, and perhaps a tiny glimmer of hope. Then the moment passed, and Mr. Henderson disappeared into his house, leaving Derek standing alone on the leaf-strewn lawn. The day started like any other for Derek. The early morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and would smoke from distant chimneys. As he drove down Maple Street, his eyes automatically sought out Mr. Henderson's house, a habit born of weeks of concern and growing connection. But today something was different. Derek felt it even before he fully registered what he was seeing. He slowed the garbage truck to a crawl, his brow furrowing as he took in the scene before him. Mr. Henderson's house, usually a picture of neglected melancholy, now seemed downright ominous. All the blinds were drawn tight, not a single gap allowing even a sliver of light to escape. The porch light, which Mr. Henderson habitually left on, was dark. There was an eerie stillness about the place, as if the very air around it was holding its breath. That's odd, Derek muttered to himself, parking the truck and climbing out. As he approached the house, the sense of wrongness intensified. The overgrown lawn was littered with fallen leaves, as if it had been neglected for days. The porch steps creaked ominously under his feet, the sound unnaturally loud in the morning quiet. But it was the trash bin that really caught Derek's attention. Unlike its usual neat, barely filled state, it was overflowing. The lid couldn't even close properly, propped open by the sheer volume of its contents. Derek's heart began to race. Something was very wrong. With a deep breath to steady himself, Derek reached for the lid of the bin. As he lifted it, a musty, metallic smell hit his nostrils, making him recoil. Steeling himself, he peered inside. What he saw made his blood run cold. Atop the pile of garbage was a cloth, once white, but now stained a rusty brown. Derek's mind rebelled against the implication, but he couldn't deny what his eyes were telling him. It was blood. A lot of blood. "Oh, God," he whispered, his hand shaking as he reached in to move the cloth aside. Underneath, he found more disturbing items. Shards of porcelain were scattered throughout the bin, some edges sharp enough to cut. Derek recognized pieces of what must have been a beautiful vase, its delicate floral pattern now fractured and discarded. But it was the photograph that truly shook him. Half of a picture, torn right down the middle, showed a young woman with a radiant smile. Her eyes sparkled with joy, frozen in a moment of happiness now literally ripped apart. With a jolt, Derek realized this must be Mrs. Henderson in her youth. As he stood there, trying to process what he was seeing, a chill ran down his spine. He had the distinct feeling of being watched. Slowly, hardly daring to breathe, Derek turned towards the house. There, framed in the doorway, stood Mr. Henderson. The old man looked nothing like the gruff but gradually warming neighbor Derek had come to know. His face was ashen, his eyes sunken and rimmed with red as if he hadn't slept in days. His clothes, usually neat if worn, were disheveled and stained. But it was the look in Mr. Henderson's eyes that truly struck Derek. There was dread there, a bone-deep fear that seemed to radiate from him. For a long moment, they stood there, frozen in a tableau of discovery and despair. The morning breeze rustled the leaves around them, the only sound in the tense silence. Finally, Derek found his voice. "Mr. Henderson," he said softly, trying to keep the tremor out of his words. "Are you all right? What's happened?" Mr. Henderson's lips moved, but no sound came out. He looked down at his hands, which Derek now noticed were trembling violently, then back up at Derek. The plea in his eyes was unmistakable now. This was a man who had reached his breaking point, who desperately needed help but didn't know how to ask for it. Derek took a cautious step forward, his mind racing. What should he do? Call the police? Try to talk to Mr. Henderson? The blood-stained cloth weighed heavily on his conscience. What if something terrible had happened? "Mr. Henderson," he tried again, keeping his voice calm and steady. "I'm here to help. Whatever's going on, we can figure it out together. But I need you to talk to me. Can you do that?" The old man's face crumpled, a lifetime of pain and loneliness etched into every line. He opened his mouth again, and this time, a sound emerged, a low, keening moan that seemed to come from the depths of his soul. Derek's heart ached at the sound. Whatever had happened, whatever secrets Mr. Henderson had been keeping, it was clear that the old man was suffering deeply. Taking another careful step forward, Derek held out his hand. "It's okay," he said gently. "You're not alone anymore. Let me help you." For a moment, it seemed like Mr. Henderson might retreat back into the house, closing the door on Derek and any chance of help. But then, with agonizing slowness, he reached out a trembling hand. As their fingers touched, Derek felt a jolt of connection. In that moment, he knew that whatever came next, he was committed. He would see this through, would help Mr. Henderson face whatever demons were haunting him. "That's it," Derek encouraged, carefully closing his hand around Mr. Henderson's. "Let's go inside and talk, okay? Everything's going to be all right." Mr. Henderson nodded jerkily, then turned and shuffled back into the house. Derek followed, his heart pounding. As he crossed the threshold, the musty smell of neglect and despair washed over him. The interior of the house was dim, the drawn curtains blocking out most of the morning light. As his eyes adjusted, Derek took in the scene around him. The living room was a mess, papers and books strewn about, furniture askew as if someone had been searching frantically for something. Mr. Henderson led him to a worn armchair, sinking into it with a heavy sigh. Derek perched on the edge of the sofa across from him, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "Mr. Henderson," he began gently, "I'm worried about you. Can you tell me what's been going on?" The old man's eyes darted around the room, never settling on Derek for more than a moment. His hands twisted in his lap, fingers working nervously against each other. I didn't mean for it to happen," Mr. Henderson whispered, his voice barely audible. "It was an accident. I swear it was an accident." A chill ran down Derek's spine. "What was an accident, Mr. Henderson?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Mr. Henderson's eyes filled with tears. "Margaret," he choked out. "My Margaret. She fell. I couldn't catch her in time. There was so much blood." Derek's mind raced. Margaret must be Mrs. Henderson. But hadn't the neighbors said she died a year ago? What was Mr. Henderson talking about? When did this happen? Derek asked carefully. Mr. Henderson's brow furrowed in confusion. "Last night? No, that's not right. I can't remember. The days, they all blur together now." Derek took a deep breath, trying to piece together what he was hearing. "Mr. Henderson," he said gently, "I thought your wife passed away last year. Is that right?" The old man's face crumpled. "Yes," he whispered. "Yes, she did. But I see her, Derek. I see her everywhere. Sometimes it feels like she's still here." Understanding began to dawn on Derek. The isolation, the erratic behavior, the confused ramblings. Mr. Henderson wasn't just grieving. He was lost in his grief, unable to distinguish between past and present, memory and reality. "The blood," Derek said softly. "In the trash. Can you tell me about that?" Mr. Henderson looked down at his hands, turning them over as if seeing them for the first time. "I cut myself," he mumbled. "On the vase. Margaret's favorite vase. I was trying to clean it, but my hands were shaking. It slipped. There was so much blood. Just like when Margaret fell." Relief washed over Derek, tempered immediately by deep concern for Mr. Henderson's state of mind. "And the photograph?" he prompted gently. Tears spilled down Mr. Henderson's cheeks. I couldn't bear to look at it anymore, he whispered. Seeing her so young, so happy, knowing I'll never see her smile again. I tore it up, but then I couldn't bear to lose it completely. So I kept half. I don't know why. Derek's heart ached for the old man. The depth of his grief, the confusion and despair he must have been living with, was overwhelming. Mr. Henderson, Derek began gently. Can you tell me more about what's been troubling you? I want to understand so I can help. The old man's eyes welled up with tears. His voice quavered as he spoke. It's not just losing Margaret. It's everything. Derek leaned forward, encouraging him to continue. Mr. Henderson took a shaky breath. Margaret was sick for a long time before she left me. The medical bills, they just kept piling up. I thought I could handle it, but his voice broke, and Derek reached out to pat his hand reassuringly. We spent our entire savings, Mr. Henderson continued, his words tumbling out now. I even took out a second mortgage on the house. But it wasn't enough. And now, without her, I can't keep up with the bills. I can't even think straight most days. Derek's heart ached for the old man. Mr. Henderson, why didn't you ask for help? The old man's face crumpled. I was ashamed. We always prided ourselves on being self-sufficient. And the neighbors, they all seemed so perfect, so put together. I couldn't bear to let them see how far I'd fallen. Derek shook his head, squeezing Mr. Henderson's hand. There's no shame in needing help, sir. We all do sometimes. But this is more than I can handle alone. I think we need to call for some professional help. Is that okay? Fear flashed in Mr. Henderson's eyes. No, please. They'll take me away. This house, it's all I have left of her. Nobody's going to take you away, Derek assured him. But you need medical attention, and there are people who can help with your financial troubles too. Please let me call 911. Mr. Henderson hesitated, then gave a small nod. Okay, he whispered. I'm just so tired of fighting alone. Derek squeezed his hand once more before pulling out his phone. He dialed 911, his voice calm as he explained the situation to the dispatcher. Yes, I'm with an elderly neighbor. He's been struggling with grief and financial issues. There are some minor injuries, but I'm more concerned about his mental state. No, he's not a danger to himself or others, but he definitely needs help. Okay, thank you. We'll be waiting. As he hung up, Derek noticed Mr. Henderson watching him with a mix of fear and gratitude. They're on their way, he said softly. It's going to be okay, Mr. Henderson. I promise. The minutes ticked by slowly as they waited. Derek kept up a gentle stream of conversation, trying to keep Mr. Henderson calm. He shared stories from his own life, times when he'd struggled and needed help. Mr. Henderson nodded, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. You're a good man, Derek. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. Before Derek could respond, the sound of sirens filled the air. Mr. Henderson tensed, but Derek placed a reassuring hand on his arm. It's okay. They're here to help. Moments later, there was a knock at the door. Derek went to answer it, finding two paramedics and a woman in plain clothes who introduced herself as a social worker. As the paramedics began checking Mr. Henderson's vitals and tending to the cut on his hand, the social worker, Sarah, sat down across from him. Mr. Henderson, she said gently, I'm here to help. Can you tell me a bit about what's been going on? Haltingly, with frequent glances at Derek for reassurance, Mr. Henderson began to share his story. He spoke of Margaret's illness, the mounting bills, the crushing loneliness after her death. As he talked, Sarah listened attentively, occasionally asking a clarifying question or offering a word of comfort. Mr. Henderson, Sarah said when he'd finished, I want you to know that there are resources available to help you. We can assist with financial counseling, grief support, and even home care if you need it. You don't have to face this alone anymore. Mr. Henderson's eyes filled with tears. I don't know how to thank you all, he said, his voice choked with emotion. You don't have to thank us, Derek said warmly. This is what community is all about. We look out for each other. As the paramedics finished their examination, declaring that Mr. Henderson didn't need hospitalization but should follow up with his doctor, Sarah began outlining the next steps. I'm going to set up some appointments for you, she explained. Financial counseling, grief support, and a checkup with your doctor. Is that okay? Mr. Henderson nodded, looking overwhelmed but grateful. And Derek, Sarah continued, would you be willing to help Mr. Henderson get to these appointments? Having a familiar face can make a big difference. Of course, Derek said without hesitation. I'd be happy to. As the emergency responders prepared to leave, promising to follow up soon, Derek noticed a commotion outside. He went to the window and was surprised to see several neighbors gathered on the sidewalk, their faces etched with concern. Mr. Henderson, he said, I think some of the neighbors are worried about you. Would it be okay if I went out and let them know you're all right? The old man looked surprised, then nodded. I guess so. I didn't think anyone would notice or care. Derek stepped outside, immediately surrounded by anxious faces. Mrs. Thompson from next door spoke first. Derek, is everything okay? We saw the ambulance and got worried. Derek took a deep breath. Mr. Henderson has been going through a tough time, he explained. He's been struggling since his wife passed away, dealing with grief and some financial troubles. But he's getting help now. The neighbors exchanged glances, many looking guilty. We had no idea, Mr. Johnson, the retired police officer, said gruffly. We should have checked on him. We all should have, Mrs. Davis added. Is there anything we can do to help? Derek felt a surge of hope. Actually, yes. Mr. Henderson needs support right now. Maybe we could organize a neighborhood effort, help with meals, yard work, just stopping by for a chat. The response was immediate and enthusiastic. Neighbors began volunteering for various tasks, their earlier indifference replaced by genuine concern and a desire to help. As Derek turned to go back inside, he found Mr. Henderson standing in the doorway, leaning heavily on his cane. The old man's eyes were wide as he took in the scene. Did they want to help? He asked, his voice trembling. Derek smiled, placing a gentle hand on Mr. Henderson's shoulder. They do. You're not alone anymore, Mr. Henderson. We're all here for you. Tears spilled down Mr. Henderson's cheeks as several neighbors approached, offering words of support and apologies for not reaching out sooner. In that moment, Derek saw a change come over the old man. The weight of isolation that had bowed his shoulders for so long seemed to lift a little. A tiny spark of hope flickered in his eyes. As the days passed, that spark grew stronger. True to their word, the neighbors rallied around Mr. Henderson. Mrs. Thompson organized a meal train, ensuring he had hot, home-cooked food every day. Mr. Johnson and his son tackled the overgrown yard, transforming it back into the neat garden it had once been. Derek, true to his promise, drove Mr. Henderson to his appointments. He sat with him through financial counseling sessions, helping him understand his options and make a plan to tackle his debt. He waited patiently outside during grief counseling, always ready with a supportive word or a quiet presence on the drive home. Slowly but surely, Mr. Henderson began to emerge from his shell. The house that had been a dark, cluttered den of memories started to come alive again. With help from the neighbors, he sorted through Margaret's things, keeping treasured mementos and donating the rest to charity. One sunny afternoon, about a month after that fateful morning, Derek arrived at Mr. Henderson's house for their weekly check-in. He was surprised to find the old man on the porch, a fresh coat of paint on the railing beside him. Derek, Mr. Henderson called out, a smile lighting up his face. Come see what we've done. As Derek climbed the steps, he noticed the porch swing had been repaired and repainted. The front door, once peeling and faded, now shone with a cheerful red coat. It looks great, Mr. Henderson, Derek said warmly. Did you do all this yourself? The old man chuckled, shaking his head. Oh no, I had plenty of help. That young couple from down the street, the Millers, they're quite handy. And little Timmy from next door helped me choose the color for the door. Said it reminded him of a fire truck. Derek grinned, marveling at the change in Mr. Henderson. Gone was the haunted, desperate man he'd found that morning. In his place was someone who, while still carrying the weight of his loss, seemed to have found a new purpose. You know, Derek, Mr. Henderson said, his voice thoughtful, I've been thinking a lot about Margaret lately. Not just missing her, but really thinking about the life we shared. Derek sat down next to him on the porch swing. What kind of thoughts? Mr. Henderson smiled, a faraway look in his eyes. Good ones mostly, remembering the happy times, the adventures we had. And I realized something. Margaret wouldn't have wanted me to shut myself away, to stop living just because she's gone. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a photograph. It was the other half of the torn picture Derek had found in the trash that day. But now, it had been carefully repaired. The two halves joined together again. I found this when we were cleaning out the attic, Mr. Henderson explained. Mrs. Davis helped me fix it. It's from our honeymoon, you know. We were so young, so full of dreams. Derek studied the photo. The young couple beamed at the camera, their whole lives ahead of them. You look very happy, he said softly. Mr. Henderson nodded. We were. And you know what? I think Margaret would be happy now, seeing how the neighborhood has come together. She always said a strong community could weather any storm. As they sat there, the porch swing gently rocking, Derek felt a profound sense of gratitude. What had started as a simple act of kindness had blossomed into something beautiful. A community reborn, a life reclaimed from the brink of despair. Mr. Henderson, Derek said, I'm really proud of you. You've come so far. The old man's eyes misted over. I couldn't have done it without you, Derek. You saw me when I was invisible. You reached out when everyone else had given up. Derek shook his head. I just did what anyone would do, what a good neighbor should do. Mr. Henderson chuckled. Well, you've set quite an example. Did you know the Johnsons have started a neighborhood watch program? And Mrs. Thompson is talking about organizing a block party next month. As if on cue, they heard the sound of children laughing. Looking out, they saw a group of kids riding their bikes down the street, waving as they passed. Among them was Timmy from next door, proudly wearing a shirt that declared him a junior neighborhood helper. Mr. Henderson waved back, a broad smile on his face. You know, Derek, he said, for the first time in a long while, I'm looking forward to tomorrow, to seeing what new adventures it might bring. Derek felt a lump form in his throat. I'm glad to hear that, Mr. Henderson. Really glad. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in vibrant hues of orange and pink, Derek knew he was witnessing more than just a beautiful sunset. He was seeing the dawn of a new chapter, not just for Mr. Henderson, but for the entire neighborhood. The once isolated street had transformed into a true community, bound together by compassion, understanding, and the simple act of looking out for one another. And at the heart of it all was a reminder that sometimes the most profound changes start with the smallest acts of kindness. As Derek stood to leave, Mr. Henderson caught his hand. Thank you, he said simply, his eyes shining with gratitude. Derek squeezed his hand gently. That's what neighbors are for, Mr. Henderson. That's what neighbors are for. Walking back to his truck, Derek couldn't help but smile. The street that had once seemed so cold and unwelcoming now buzzed with warmth and life. Porch lights flickered on, casting a warm glow over the sidewalks. Neighbors called out greetings to each other, their voices filled with genuine warmth. As he climbed into his truck, Derek took one last look at Mr. Henderson's house. The old man was still on the porch, waving goodbye. But he wasn't alone anymore. Mrs. Thompson had joined him, a plate of cookies in her hand, ready to share an evening chat. Derek started the engine, his heart full. He had set out to make a difference in one man's life. But in doing so, he had helped an entire community rediscover its heart. As he drove away, the words on the street sign caught his eye, Maple Street. But to Derek, it would always be more than that. It was home. Derek's decision to reach out not only saved Mr. Henderson from despair, but also brought a renewed sense of community to the neighborhood. It's a reminder that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can make the biggest difference. What would you have done if you were in Derek's shoes? Let us know in the comments below. And if this story moved you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss out on more powerful tales like this one.